Today we have a special presentation from Maha IC from Suez Canal. Maha is a Moretti trainee from year 2000 and I can't
16.
remember. What's that?
16.
2016. There you go. She has taken the fast track to stardom.
Yes.
So today we have a special session on informed consent. With that, unless there's any questions about any housekeeping issues about the training. Again, we're only having one session today. So without any other questions, Maha, why don't you begin your presentation?
Okay, thank you, Professor Henry. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. So allow me to make a really quick introduction again of myself. My name is Maha IC. Okay, so again, my name is Maha IC. I have a PhD in rheumatology and rehabilitation. I'm a Moretti graduate in 2018. I joined the program in 2016, and then I graduated in 2018. It's been a wonderful experience, a life-changing experience, and I hope you all get to enjoy the same experience that I've enjoyed. So let's start talking about the informed consent, which is one of the most important documents that relate to research ethics. So this is the, So these are the objectives of this mini session. So by the end of this session, we will hopefully have covered the essential elements of the informed consent, the steps of obtaining an informed consent, the factors that could interfere with the ability of a person to provide an informed consent. We would also discuss some issues pertaining to cultural sensitivity and comprehension of informed consent. So these are the main themes that we'll be covering in this session. Who gives an informed consent and who is responsible for obtaining one? Why do we take an informed consent? What is the importance of the informed consent document? When should we take an informed consent? And what is the contents of the informed consent? What is the process of obtaining an informed consent? So who here is familiar with the process of obtaining an informed consent? Has any one of the participants with us today been involved in obtaining an informed consent from a research participant? So does anyone, can you unmute yourself? Does anyone has an experience with obtaining an informed consent?
Yeah, I had that experience before with my thesis research, my MD thesis.
Okay.
I was supposed to write an informed consent and to translate it into Arabic translation. And then every participant in the research should sign this.
Okay.
It was revised by the ethical committee.
Okay. Did you do the process? Were you responsible for obtaining the informed consent from the participants?
Yeah.
Okay. You're in pediatrics, right?
Yeah, pediatric neurology.
Okay. Did you take the informed consent from the participants, from the research participants, or from their parents or someone else?
From the parents and legal guardians.
Legal guardians. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to be frank,
yes.
it was not done correctly at that time. Okay.
Okay.
Since I was at the NIH last 6 months in a postdoc fellowship, and I saw how the informed consent should be done correctly. So I don't think I gave enough time for that. I mean, dealing with the patient was, it didn't take enough time, like to inform them with everything, and they usually they agree, since there was no intervention. It was like just doing investigations for the patients. But maybe at the NIH I reviewed how to give more time and how to give every chance to ask all the questions about it.
Okay, so if you had to do it again, you would do it differently now.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Sayed, please go ahead. Dr. El Sayed, do you have something to share? Hello.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Hello.
Just we need Henry, Dr. Henry, to allow Golana to enter the meeting.
I think Golana is with us.
Hello. Yes, I just could join the discussion. Thank you, Sasan.
Okay, welcome, Golana.
Thank you.
So we're discussing informed consent. We're just getting started. So I'm asking about experiences with obtaining informed consent. So Dr. Said, you have the microphone. Tell us your experience.
Yeah, sorry. So I will repeat the words of Dr. Sarah. I am also a pediatrician, and I involved in talking informed consent for maybe 2 or 3 studies. Mostly were observational. But I think that this process was very deficient, and the informed consent we used was didn't contain the essential elements as I started to read now. So in the future I will try to do better.
Okay, thank you. So when we review the essential elements, if you could kindly tell us which ones were missing in your previous informed consent, maybe that would be a good idea when we get to the part where we review the essential elements. Okay, so why do we obtain? Does anyone else have something to add? So if you're not speaking, could you mute yourself? Thank you. So why do we obtain an informed consent? So from a regulatory point of view, the voluntary consent of the human subjects is absolutely essential. This is one of the most important documents in research ethics, the Nuremberg Code. So this means that persons involved should have legal capacity to give consent without any intervention of deceit or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the subject matter. So, and of course, that in the background of research ethics, the whole domain has emerged from a background of severe human rights violation and research projects that were done without consent. So it was essential for a document like the Nuremberg Code to specify that the informed consent is absolutely essential. Another document, the Belmont Report, says respect for persons demands that subjects enter into research voluntarily and with adequate information. And that is why it is important to do an informed consent. So who do we obtain the informed consent from? And from whom do we obtain the informed consent? This is a very easy question. So we obtain the informed consent from the subject who is going to be enrolled in the study, someone who is fulfilling the inclusion and exclusion criteria, or their legally authorized representative. Like we have here colleagues who do research on children. So because children do not have the legal capacity to give the informed consent, we then search for someone else who is the legally authorized representative. Who may obtain the informed consent? Who is responsible for obtaining the informed consent? Usually a qualified research team member trained with sufficient knowledge about the specific study. This may include the principal investigator, sub-investigators, research coordinators, or other research team members approved by the IRB. These are the people who are responsible for obtaining the informed consent. Now, this is the first exercise. So can you use your annotation toolbar? Okay, if you're able to do that, could you, these are 12 elements. Only 8 of these are the essential elements of an informed consent. So we have 8 essential elements. So if each participant would mark 8 of these that you think are the essential elements. Can you use your marking pen? Yes, exactly, just like that. So I'd like each of you to mark the ones that you think are the essential elements. Just 8, only 8.
Yeah, I'll send it to you again. No problem. I'll send it.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Okay, good. Okay. No problem.
Go ahead. Okay, have you all made up your mind? Are you all done? So I see someone will not include the benefits in your informed consent as an essential element. Why do you expect the participants to participate then if you don't mention the benefits? Okay, so let's review which of these are the essential elements. So like most of you said, the first essential element is the purpose, duration, and procedure of research. The risks, I think all of you marked the risks. The benefits, of course, you have to mention the benefits. This is one of the 8 essential elements. The alternative procedures, what will the participant get if they refuse or decline to participate in the study? What else would they give? Would they be given? Assurance of confidentiality, this is one of the essential elements. Research-related injury in more than minimal risk research. We'll be discussing each element of these separately now. The contact information, it's very important because, as you know, the participant gets a copy of the informed consent and they need to know who to contact in case they have questions or complaints. So you have to put the contact info of the PI of the project or of the research. That there is no penalty for choosing not to participate. So the voluntariness of participation, and that the participant can choose to withdraw at the beginning or during the research project. Oh, let's see if we can remove all these.
May I ask? I have a question from the last slide,
Yeah.
please.
Go ahead.
What is the age for children? I mean, what's the age to give consent? And what about the assent?
Okay. I think you will have a full session on research involving children.
Okay.
But,
So,
what, I mean, that's, yes, we'll have a session on children, but what is the age of consent for an adult? What is it in your countries? I mean,
think above 18.
18.
Egypt is above 18, right?
Right. Well, that's a good answer. Though in the past, I've heard disagreements about the age of adulthood in Egypt. I've heard 18 and 21 and 20 and now Egypt doesn't have a law on research.
No.
So what do you depend it on? How do you, I mean?
I don't know. I don't know. I think Maha means the age as pediatrics for clinical purposes. We consider a patient in the pediatric department up to 18 years. After 18, it's in the internal medicine, for example.
Right. Yeah. I think most ethics committees in Egypt and the rest of the Middle East, the age is 18. So we have people from other countries. Dua, what is it in UAE or Sudan? Now, are you guys not able to unmute yourself?
No, we can unmute ourselves. I am unmuted.
Well, it looks like I have to specifically ask you to unmute yourself. Is that it?
Yeah. When I try to unmute, it again muted itself.
Okay.
It mutes you. Well, why don't we keep everybody unmuted? So it looks like most people are now. What, do you automatically get muted again?
No, I'm not. I'm fine.
No, but other people I see are now muted.
Yes, Yeah, when Dr. Maha was speaking, I think we were muted, and it says while host is speaking, I think we were muted.
I think there's something in the setting like about it, like if the host is speaking or something, it will be like muting for other.
You guys are just continuing getting muted. Let me try to. Oh wait. I think.
Now I'm
I
unmuted.
think now you can unmute yourself.
Now, yeah, now I can unmute myself.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, good.
Dua, please tell us
So,
about your
Dua, what's the age?
I guess here in the UAE, 18 the age, but in Sudan, I'm not sure really. I have to look for it. But I think it's also in the same range of 18. Most of the countries.
Okay. Gulana, what about Iran?
Iran is also 18.
18.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, well, wait a minute.
Okay. So
Dr.
let's
Maha, I have a
review.
question.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So there was like something they used to do at the NIH. They usually, after getting the consent signed by the parents or the legal guardians, they explain everything to the children above age of 6, and they have to write down their name. Usually, children above 6 can write down their name, so they like sign to agree to be part of research. So I don't know if
the assent of the child.
Yeah. So should this be done above age of 6 and should be done as all research? Because we usually in Egypt we do not get any sign from
Assent.
children. Yeah, or assent from children.
We do not do the assent, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you can explain if the child is like, I think older than 10 even. We usually do not explain below this. But if the parents agree, we usually do not involve the child. Or let me say it in another word, they cannot refuse, you know what I mean?
So what happens if the child refuses?
At the NIH, they would stop it.
Okay,
but
so
we not give the chance to our children, and that's why I feel like I'm missing so much.
Until the session on research in pediatric populations, then you will have a discussion about the age of assent and what happens if a child refuses. Okay, so the 8 essential elements are: first, you have to explain what the research involves, what the study involves, what the purpose of the study, what are the objectives, duration of the procedure. Then you have to explain the risks or discomfortable, and we only explain the discomfort or risks that are reasonably foreseeable.
Can I say something?
Okay.
Can I?
I'm sorry, who is speaking?
Can I say something?
Yes, Vivian.
Hello, can I say something?
Yes. Yes, go ahead. Hello.
Can I say something?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear
Hello?
you. Can you hear us?
I'm from the Gambia, Vivian. Yeah.
Yes, welcome.
Yeah, like my I have a poor connection, so I've been fluctuating, but at the latter end, I heard about the consent for adolescents.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, I've not been hearing much, but at least at the latter point, I heard about.
Now we can't hear you.
Yeah, she's having problems with her network.
Oh, I think she left.
Yeah.
Okay, when she gets back, we'll take that question.
Okay.
So the first essential element, as we said, is the purpose of the research, what does the study involve, what procedures will be done during the research, the risks, anything that is foreseeable to happen, reasonably foreseeable, not something that is really rare or something that is not very common to happen. We also need to mention the benefits. Okay, what will the person benefit by participating in this research? And also in a session on risks and benefits, you will be exposed to what we call benefits in research. One of the essential elements also is the alternative procedures. If there's something that will be offered, if the patient refuses to participate in a study, what will be offered? Because we want to make sure that the participant knows that there is an alternative treatment and that he will receive something, or he or she will receive something if they choose not to join the program or not to join the project. Because if they think that the only way they're getting treatment is by joining the trial, then they might be more prone to join. So they have to know what they would receive if they choose not to join. Confidentiality, everything that relates to the private information of the patient, how it will be kept, if this private information will be obtained in the first place, or if it's anonymous survey, for example, this also has to be mentioned. Then if private information is going to be collected, how is it going to be stored, and who will have access to this information? The research-related injury, of course, this is sometimes research is more than minimal risk. So sometimes, yes, we do research projects that have risks. And in this case, if there is something that might cause an injury, then what is this injury, and if the research team is going to provide treatment or compensation for the participants. One of the important also or essential elements is the contact information, person that the participant needs to contact if they have any questions or they need to report a side effect or an injury. And finally, that the participation in this research project is completely voluntary, that the patient will not be penalized if he chooses or she chooses not to join the program, the research project, that they will not lose any benefits by choosing not to participate in or by choosing to discontinue even after they give consent. They need to be assured that they can withdraw their consent or withdraw themselves from participating in the project at any point without any penalty, without being asked to pay, for example, for the treatments they have received, or without withdrawing of any benefits they have already received in the project, okay? So these are the 8 essential elements. So if we really wanted to make a very comprehensive informed consent, we would have to make a very big document. So with these 8 elements, these are absolutely essential. They have to be present in every consent form, unless, of course, there is a reason to waive parts or the whole of the informed consent, and there is also going to be a session about that. There are also additional elements that if the IRB or the research team decides that it is important to mention, then they should be mentioned as well in the informed consent. For example, like unforeseeable risks, risks that are rare, if they are very dangerous, maybe the research team or the IRB could choose to make the research team put it in the informed consent. Participation termination by the PI. Sometimes the PI might decide to terminate the participation of a participant despite them giving consent. Okay, so this usually is not mentioned because it sort of goes without saying. But if the IRB thinks it's important, then we mention that the PI could terminate the participation of a participant at any time due to, for example, side effects or risks. Additional costs subject due to participation. For example, if the participant will have to travel a distance, for example, and incur costs in order to do an investigation that will be done routinely, or a cost that will not be covered by the research team, then it might be mentioned. If it is significant, then the IRB might make the PI mention it in the informed consent. Withdrawal. What happens if the participant withdraws, for example, in the middle of a clinical trial? They have already received part of the drug. Then what is the procedure that will happen if the participant withdraws during the trial? Significant new findings. If something comes up during the research trial or the research project, sometimes the IRB would mandate that the PI informs the subjects of these new findings, okay? Also the number of participating subjects, like your sample size. Sometimes we mention the sample size in the informed consent, but as you see here, it's not one of the essential elements. So these are the constituents of the essential elements. So if I can go back to Dr. Maha and Dr. Said, if you could tell us which of the essential elements was missing in the informed consent that you have obtained previously in the past? Do you know, is there something on your mind that you know that you have missed previously?
So I think all were written, okay, but
okay.
Maybe it was not, there was no enough time to discuss every point with the parents. It was about how to deliver the consent, not how to write.
Okay, so you're talking about the how, not the what.
Yeah.
So how, or you're talking about the informed consent process. We will be discussing this very shortly. But yeah. in terms of the essential elements, you're saying that they were all present. You had the 8 essential elements in your informed consent.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me ask also all of you, if you have written informed consent before. For example, for us, people working in the medical field, we have no problem in understanding the medical terminology or the term, for example, even the term clinical trial. How do we, when we ask patients to sign the informed consent, we want to make sure that they understand. So what do you think we should do in order to have them understand the complex terminology we might be using?
I think we should simplify the consent form as much as possible.
Yes, yes.
So
exactly.
that so it's understandable to the public, and providing translation if we are using people with different language background or and different dialect or something, or provide even translators.
Yes, yes.
Interpreters.
Actually, yes, we usually in Egypt, for example, we don't write an English informed consent and translate it. We usually write an Arabic informed consent because this is the language we speak, and so we could like provide an Arabic summary of the proposal.
And yes, like, and it can be like the
Fabienne?
Yeah, Fabienne wrote down her question in the chat box. She has a question, she typed it.
And for the case of Gambia, normally we write the informed consent in English and then we translate it locally.
So what is the national language? What is your
Yeah, and for the case of the consent in the Gambia,
yes,
for the Gambia we write in English. The consent will be in English. Then it depends on the community that you are facing. If we're told the local language, we speak in their own local language for them to understand it. So it depends on each community.
So how many local languages do you have in Gambia? Do you have many local languages?
Yes, we have many local languages. Yes, we have up to 8, more than 8 languages.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. So it's written first in English,
so
then
in English, and then we translate in the local language in each community that we are facing. So most of the time, the health workers, some can speak up to 4 languages, including English.
Okay, that's very multilingual.
Yeah.
Okay, so now about the how that was Dr. Maha discussing. What is the process of obtaining an informed consent? So when you approach a participant, and then you during your interview in your clinic, for example, you find that this participant is fulfilling the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So what is the next step? What do you do in order to obtain their informed consent to participate in a trial that you're conducting, or in even an observational study? So what do you think is the first thing you need to do?
For the first thing to do, I think you need, for the case of Gambia, the first thing you need to do that each community, they have a head, they have a leader. So if you first approach the leader and explain it to the leader that this is what you want to do, then once the leader gives you the go ahead, the community always accepts you.
Okay, so
yeah.
Do you have concerns that maybe they will accept for fear of the leader or for respect of the leader, not because they voluntarily want to join the trial or join the study?
It's, first of all, the respect for the leader, but even when the leader speaks, if they are interested, they can participate. If they are not interested, then they cannot force them. But they always give respect to the leader. And the leader will give the reason why this process is needed in the community.
And how
because
can
the
you
leader
make sure
will inform them that it benefits from them.
Okay. So in a clinical setting, if you're not doing a community research, in a clinical setting, if you're approached by a patient, if you are as a health worker, and this patient fulfills the criteria, how do you do that?
Yeah. As a clinical, there is always a clinical. There's a community leader, clinical community leader.
Okay, there's a clinical
yeah,
community
we have
leader.
Community, like example nurses, we have community nurses in the community.
Okay.
And the patients, they always respect and trust the community nurse. Yes.
So there always has to be someone in the middle?
Yes.
Is there not enough trust between the medical teams and the public?
Of course, there is enough trust.
Okay.
Because patients here in the Gambia, they trust the community nurses or community clinicals.
Okay.
Because they are always the frontliners, so they always trust them. Because of the locality of the community. Because once you give them a clear confidence that you can do this and you're gonna do this, they always give you the 100% trust in whatever trials you're gonna do.
Yes, but research is different a little bit from medical practice, because sometimes you will expose people to risks, and sometimes they will be taking a placebo drug, for example. So let's, what is the process in Egypt? What do you do, or in Iran? If Gulana would like to share, in Sudan, Matt would like to share.
The procedure is, you mentioned that if a physician sees a patient and think that the patient has inclusion criteria.
Yes.
It's very much clear that he explains everything and provides the informed consent and says that there is a research and based on the inclusion-exclusion criteria, we think you are included. But the thing is that the physician cannot take the consent from his own patient to to recruit him for his research, because of the conflict of interest they have and the bias, he will have. So the patient thinks that he has to participate to the research, otherwise he thinks that something might happen. So here we always advise, even for the research in the committees, in research ethics committees, that it is not acceptable that a physician takes the informed consent from his own patient for his own research. He should allocate someone, research team member, someone not involved in his care, and he has to clarify that there is nothing interfering with your treatment with your physician if you do not want to participate in the research.
So, and this is because you think it might be conflicting for the patient if his own or her own physician asks him or her to join a study, because of therapeutic misconception. They might misconceive the idea of research as a treatment because it comes from their physician, or is it because of the power relationship a doctor has with his or her patients?
Yes, both. It's like colleagues asking other colleagues to join their own research. It's the same.
So you don't do that also?
Yeah, that's why here the committees are very concerned about this, because we have lots of university hospitals, lots of research, and it's quite popular that physicians are also involving in research and they want to recruit their own patients. So we are very, very restrict on that in research ethics committees.
So the committee sort of forces physicians or bans physicians from in taking the informed consent from their own patients, but they
yes, they have to allocate someone.
Okay. So what about Egypt and Sudan? Do you have the same restrictions? I cannot hear you, Dua.
Sorry,
Yes.
because I'm living in the UAE, so I will explain a little bit about it.
Okay, tell us about Emirates.
So I think the same, it's happening here in the UAE, as not the physicians themselves are not allowed to take the consent form. There should be someone trained, and that person is responsible to explain about the consent form, about the whole research. But when it comes to the observational cross-sectional research, I don't think that much. Like it can be even like online surveys that is done, and it is not like if you are accepting to go to the online survey, then this means that you are consent with being a part of the research. So it's different, like in the cross-sectional.
Okay, so you're saying it depends on the level of risk or the level
of it is cross-sectional survey, it will be in the first page, and it will be like one simple paragraph, and if you agree or to enter the survey, then it is considered like you consent on the not like the real clinical research.
Okay, so what about Egypt? We have a majority from Egypt.
Yeah, physicians in Egypt take the informed consent. So usually we write it down and it's revised by ethical committee or the IRB in Egypt. And then if it is approved, physician is responsible for getting the sign of the informed consent by the parents or legal guardians and children, and by the adults or the participant themselves in others.
Okay, so actually Gulana and Dua, they raised very good points about therapeutic misconceptions and also about power relationships, and they need to be kept in mind in obtaining an informed consent. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of an IRB in Egypt that would ban physicians from taking informed consent from their own patients. I've not heard of that in Egypt, to the best of my knowledge. So
for the point clarified by Dua and Gulana, I am thinking of the opposite. Yes. What if the other person was not knowledgeable enough about my research? So maybe
what other person? You mean the person assigned
the one who will be allocated or assigned to get the consent? Maybe
here in Iran,
read, you know.
Yeah, here in Iran, the PI should specifically mention who will take this consent, and we have the CVs, resumes, and everything from them. So we should know who is that. He should be someone involved and knowledgeable in that research. Not anyone, not anyone. Someone I know, one of my friends who is free. It's not like that. They should prove to the research ethics committee that this person is appointed.
Like we said in one of the previous slides, let me get that. The person responsible for obtaining the informed consent. Yes, it has to be a qualified research team member. Okay, so it's not the clinic nurse. You don't want to involve yourself, so you're asking the clinic nurse. No, it should be someone with sufficient knowledge about the specific study. So you need to make a very good choice of the person who will be involved in obtaining the informed consent. So,
Dr. Emad, shall I ask a question before you go further? Yes. I have a question about essential elements. Here we have a very important and essential elements in consent forms. That IRBs are very specific to have this included when they review the proposals, and that is if the research collecting identifiable information or biospecimen, they have to state that whether this will used for future or not, and if it will they will have consent or they will take or something, but they should know from the beginning that this biospecimen will be used. And because this is very common in research institutes and clinics, that for example they donate 5 embryos or I don't know eggs or whatever, and they get successful with the first or the second one, but the rest are not used, and they say, okay, you can throw them away, but the committees are very concerned that they should have this this item in their informed consent form, that it will be used in future research, but it's anonymous and it is not going to be traced to you, or it will not be used. So is it also a necessary element that
well, yes, actually in Egypt we're only starting to work on stored samples. This has not been common in the past, but for there are many institutions that are now starting to involve storing samples and doing research on stored samples, and the informed consent has different elements, like you were saying, about the duration of storage of whatever sample they'll be providing, and if they will be contacted about research in the future about their samples or not, and there are many types of or models of consent forms, like the broad consent and blanket consent. There are specific types of consents. We're really talking about here about the generic form usually used in clinical trials or in observational studies, in cross-sectional studies. But for samples, biospecimens, like you say, that will be stored for future research, or that will be obtained with the intention of doing multiple research projects, there are other models of informed consent that are actually being discussed now in Egypt.
I see. Thank you.
So yeah, Kalana, you bring up a whole well, one. You bring up a good issue, and once you start getting into collecting samples, and I do know that almost every clinical trial there is an additional procedure regarding collecting biospecimens, and now you bring up issues about future unspecified research, whether participants will share in any profits obtained from the sample, how long will the samples be stored, what kind of future research, will there be return of results to the participants. So that brings up a lot of additional elements to be sure. Now, let me ask you a question, since you brought up the question about biospecimens. So let's say you're doing a research and it involves testing a new drug for hypertension, and the investigators also want to collect a sample for future storage. So should the participant, if the participant says no to the future storage of the sample has nothing to do with the current research. Investigators, you know how investigators are. We just like collecting samples and, you know, storing samples. That's the new thing nowadays. And it's a good thing to store samples. But if the participant says no to the storage sample, should the participant still have the opportunity to join the main research study? Or is it a package deal?
I think, as we all know, informed consent is a process. So, for example, what we have is like a general informed consent that we take, that all 8 elements plus the one that I mentioned about future use of the biospecimen for research is included. But this is the general one. If any research comes on very specifically after that research or in the middle of in the middle of the research, they should go back. Or if they want to use samples from a research institute and they want to use that general informed consent, we ask them that you have to, if it's identifiable, they have to ask them. If not, okay, the first one, the general one that they tick, I agree that if they want to use it for future research and it's not identifiable, that's fine. That's enough for their research.
Okay, but that's not my question. My question is, if the participant does not want to give a sample for future research, should that participant still have the opportunity to join the current research study?
Yes, I guess so.
Kolana, what do you guys do?
I think a new consent form. A new consent form.
I guess in some consent forms, I saw that they write that the samples will be used for future research, and if the participant doesn't want this, the samples shall be discarded after this research. They are not used anymore.
Right, yeah, so essentially the concept is that, I mean, if you need to sample for the current research, that's fine. But if you want to store samples for future research, you really need a separate consent form for that.
Yes, yes.
Not bundle it into the same consent.
Not in the same?
Not in the same. It has to be
no, not in the
same form.
Yeah, a new one. Yes, a new one.
Yeah, it has to be separate. If you want to sample store for future research, then you need a separate consent form for that sample.
Yes.
I saw some consent with this like an extra item, and patient can take a sign beside the item, and if he didn't, so we're not going to have his sample stored. It was not separate.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I mean, you could, right, so you have to make it clear. You can have it in the same consent form, but you have to make it clear that they have the option to decline,
to refuse
that sample, and yet still agree to be in the main study.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it more explicit if you have a separate consent form. But the concept is that you're really asking for 2 consents.
Okay.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay, I want to ask a question. I don't know if it's relevant now. What about researches involving data collection, just data collection from files or from the records? For example, I have records of patients from 20 years ago. Okay. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't actually have the patient or the parents now.
Right. So you bring up another important issue about retrospective studies on medical records, and now we're bringing up issues about minimal risk and waiver of consent, and we'll have a separate session on that.
Okay.
Okay, good. Good thought.
So another question, please.
Sure.
Yeah. So is it essential to have a consent about using images of the patient in the consent, because it was not mentioned in the essential consent form? Because nowadays we usually have a lot of pictures or images of the patient himself or his radiological investigation. So should we add this like an essential item in the informed consent?
Okay, I think the concept is you have, like what Maha said, in the generic consent form. Genetic meaning the basic structure. Every consent has to have those 8 elements. Now, if you're doing special type of research, all right, you have the concept of additional elements. So essential means no matter what kind of research you're doing, you have to have those elements. No ifs, ands, or buts, okay? Now, if you're doing a special study with taking pictures and blah, 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 you know, I mean, yeah, you have additional elements, but we don't call them essential elements because they're not applicable to every research. So absolutely, if you're doing a different type of research study, then you need some additional elements.
Okay. What if it is retrospective? If I'm collecting data, like Sarah has mentioned before, and I have the pictures of the patient, but I don't have consent, should I reconsent the parents for this?
Well, what do you think the answer is?
I mean, if I had like consent before that the parents accept to participate, but I didn't mention using the photos, and now I'm going to use it.
So what do you think the answer is?
Yes, right.
Okay.
Maybe you should go back. You should go back and ask another consent.
Very good.
Okay. The slide, it says reconsent is required if there is new information that would affect the subject's willingness to continue participating or as directed by the IRB. So a consent that you take before is only valid for the items that you have asked the patient to consent for. If anything comes up during a trial or anything that might affect the willingness of a participant to continue in participating in the study, then you would have to reconsent. Sometimes the IRB would ask the PI to reconsent if the IRB gets knowledge about something that has come up during the trial. Okay. So about yep. So now we're discussing the how, the process of obtaining the informed consent. So it starts by identifying a potential participant that fits the criteria for a study. And then you describe the study verbally as outlined in the consent using a non-technical language. As we said, as also Gulana said, you need to simplify it as best as you can, the language in the informed consent. But first, you don't just give the informed consent to the participant and say, read that and sign if you like. This is a conversation, it's a dialogue, it's an interview between the participant and the PI or the person obtaining the informed consent. So there is a verbal explanation, a description of what the study entails, specifically what the consent says, but in a verbal form, so you can watch the facial expressions of the patient, and then you can invite patients to ask questions about, and then you could invite questions from the participant. So you don't just give them the informed consent and ask them to just sign it if they like. Then this is really something that I've noticed that is deficient where I work when we do informed consent, is to allow time for the participant to review the consent form and to consult with whoever he or she thinks is going to help them make a decision. Okay, so you don't give the consent form and ask the participant either you sign now or you refuse now. it's not a deal that you want to make or break in just on the moment. Can you still see my screen?
No.
We are seeing you.
So you should have said something.
How are you not seeing the screen?
Now we can see.
Now we can see. Now we can see.
Okay. Now, after you invite questions and answer them to the best of your knowledge, then you allow the participant to review the consent form either alone or with family members. Give them, give or take, 24 hours. You say, take it home, read it, consult with your family, with your physician, with whoever you think is going to help you make a decision. And then you need to assess the understanding of the major elements of the consent form. This is something we'll also be discussing a little bit more. Now, once there is a voluntary agreement to participate, then you obtain the signature and you date the informed consent. The signature, the patient or the participant signs the informed consent, and the investigator signed the informed consent, and the participant has the right to take a copy of the informed consent. And that is why we put the contact information, because the participant can take the consent form home. Or a copy of the consent form is the patient can take home. So as we say, the PI must sign, and then a copy is provided to the subject, and the original is maintained in the documents, because if there is ever a document review for the trial, they will need to see the informed consent of the participants. Okay, so this is the process. As you see here, the consent is not just a document that you give to your participants and ask them to sign if they are willing. It's an interview. It's a dialogue between you and the participant. They have the right to ask questions. You are obliged to answer these questions honestly, and then you should encourage the participant to take time to consider, particularly if there are risks to participating in this study. If it's a clinical trial or there are specific risks, then they need time to think about it. And then if they reach a voluntary decision on their own, then you should obtain the signature. The PI signs the same consent form, and a copy is given to the participant to keep. So this is basically the process that we're talking about. We need a participant to join the study that is appropriately informed, so they know all the correct knowledge, and they understand that knowledge. It was not just narrated to them verbally. No, we need to think of ways to ensure the understanding of the informed consent. We'll be discussing that very shortly. Then, after being informed and after they understand, they make a voluntary decision, and then they explicitly consent by signing their name on the consent form. And that is when this participant becomes a research participant. That is when you have truly obtained an informed consent. Okay, so back to the issue of understanding. This is a point of discussion. For example, in Egypt, we have a very high illiteracy rates. Okay, we have people who don't know how to read and write. We have people that did not complete their primary education, and no matter, and sometimes simplifying, as we said, simplifying medical information is not that easy. So it is the responsibility. Again, the 4 steps that I've talked about in the previous slide, these are the responsibility of the person obtaining the consent. Having the participant become appropriately informed and adequately understand, and then voluntarily decide, this is the responsibility of the person obtaining the consent. So in order to live up to this responsibility, you need to think of measures to allow participants to truly understand the elements of the informed consent. So if you have experiences with this, I don't know if I don't think Iran has the same illiteracy rate as we do, but maybe sometimes you will have people who are illiterate, and then you need to explain in words that the participant understands. What measures can we do? This is a question open for discussion. If you have any thoughts, share it with us.
They can use their stamps for signing instead of writing their names.
But this is after they have voluntarily consented.
Yeah.
So we need to go back. I need you to go back 2 steps here where we're inadequately understanding. So how do I make sure that the participant adequately understands the major elements of the informed consent?
So I think I will discuss it in the simplest way it could be. And then maybe I can ask to make sure they understand, like, do you know what you are going to do if you want to withdraw from the study? And then I can assess their answers. So if he feels like he has the voluntarily power to say no, so this means he understood my point. If not, maybe I can repeat the explanation.
Excellent. So you're going to quiz the participant.
Yeah.
Ask them questions and have them
so assess their understanding.
Okay, excellent. This is one of the excellent choices that is grounded in research. What else? Is there something about the text of the informed consent that I can do?
Maybe I can add drawings or something. Like if I want to explain about procedures, maybe it can be clarified with drawings.
Yes, excellent. This is also an excellent idea. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I had one. It was a personal experience, actually. I had to do a surgery in the States, and I was really scared because it's heart surgery. So they actually gave me a video. Since then it was like a VCR or something, and they showed me all the procedure, and there was somebody explaining every step, and they walked me through the whole operation. So, and after that, they gave me the informed consent. I was refusing before that to
say. It was a medical informed consent. It was not a research informed consent, but the concept still stands. So they used multimedia in order to simplify. They had like, visualize, see with your own eyes what exactly will be done during the procedures. And this can be easily applied to research.
Yeah, actually, I think it's really very important that you can use the visualization to attract them, to make them understand in a simple form what you're trying to do and what the risks and what the benefits. So it would really make up like 90% of my opinion after I saw the video. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as you said, there are many things we can do. Like Dr. Maha said, we can use quizzes to assess the understanding. So after you explain, you discuss verbally, then the participant takes the informed consent and reads it. And once they are ready to sign, you can stop them before signing and say, allow me to ask you a few questions to assess your understanding. Okay, do you know what are the procedures involved in this research? And if he says yes, the research involves procedures 1, 2, and 3, then I'm a bit confident that they can understand what has been said in the informed consent. Also, one of the methods is called the teach back method. Okay, yes, like Dr. Sousan said, we can use multimedia, whether it's images, videos, or even virtual reality. We can use that in order to have people gain a better understanding of what procedures, what is involved in participating in a specific study. The teach back method is when you ask the participant to tell you, to teach you about the informed consent. So you ask the participant to tell you what is involved in this informed consent. So we have the patient teach the person obtaining informed consent what are the elements that has been written in this informed consent. Also, sometimes we need an extended interview. Usually, as we said, the interview is a short discussion between the person obtaining the informed consent, and then the participant is invited to ask questions. Sometimes, if a trial involves more than minimal risk, we need this interview to be extended. We need people to put aside, we need the PI or the person obtaining the informed consent to put aside a lot of time in the process of obtaining an informed consent. And finally, we have the simplified text. which is sort of a prerequisite for any informed consent to be in the level of a sixth grader. In Egypt, we use the sixth grade, which is the end of the primary education. If a person in the sixth grade can read and understand this informed consent, then it is simplified enough. Okay. Gulana, do you have in your country also a grade or a level that people have to adjust the informed consent language to?
Yes. I didn't get what you answered. What you asked.
Yes, I was saying that in Egypt we use the sixth grade level, the end of the primary education. If a child in the end of the primary education can read and understand the words in the informed consent, then it's then said to be simple enough. So it has to be at the level of a sixth grader.
Yes, that's right. We have it as well. We have different levels, like for 13th to 15th year of age, and then 15 to 18 years of age. We have assent form with different, simplified with pictures and, different things for their age. Can I ask a question about using multimedia? I don't know how this is applicable, and maybe you can provide an example for me, because I don't understand how, for example, a physician who is very busy and asking another team member to take consent form, and how they can use this for people who are illiterate, how they can use multimedia, and what are the facilities they can use.
Well, let's first be on the same page that the informed consent process requires time. You cannot rush individuals into consenting on because the physician has little time. So
I know, I understand. Yes, I understand, and I agree with you. But I want to make sure how this is applicable. Like you have the written informed consent form, and you also use multimedia to make them understand, and
yes.
Then you give them time. Then as because you said they are illiterate, so you have someone who is literate, who is who knows how to read and write, to sign the informed consent for them. I don't know how this is applicable.
No, using the multimedia has nothing to do with illiteracy. It's just a way of ensuring understanding. If the person is literate, even if they are literate, I can still use multimedia to simplify whatever procedures are involved in the study, to have them understand it a little bit more. So yes, we have a written informed consent.
Yes, maybe I should have clarified my question. I'm still thinking about your question. You said the ways that we can get informed consent from people who are illiterate, because you said literacy rate is very low in Egypt.
Yes.
I'm thinking how a physician can use multimedia and how they get the informed consent from illiterate people.
Yes, in cases of illiteracy, either like Dr. Maha said, sometimes a participant can use their stamp. They often carry stamps that you use for signing.
Yes, we have it as well. Yes,
their fingerprint, and yes. Sometimes we have a witness. Sometimes we can employ a witness, someone that the participant trusts to be present during the informed consent. And to sign, and we have the witness sign the informed consent with the participant. But in terms of understanding, it's not just people who are illiterate who might not understand medical terminology. Sometimes even people who graduate high school, they need some form of simplification or an extended interview or multimedia to have them better understand what is involved in a procedure. For example, if we're doing a clinical trial on surgical procedures, on comparing two surgical procedures, and then maybe we can use, like Dr. Sausan said, something that will simplify to the participant what is involved in each arm of the trial. Okay.
So do you mean, so do you mean before signing the informed consent form, you show them I don't know, a short video or something that they can actually visually see what's gonna happen, and then you give them time, and then they can discuss, and then the witness will.
This is one option. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is one option that we can use, and we need really to have our options open, because understanding or the comprehension of an informed consent is a very important goal, because it's called informed, because we want to make sure that the participant is informed not just of the knowledge, but also understand what is entailed in
of course,
document be signing. And for that, there are research articles on ways of improving comprehension, specifically in contexts where, like in Egypt, for example, where the illiteracy rate is very high, and so we are more in need of ways to simplify informed consent, because sometimes people don't even know what research is. They are not aware. They know that there is a medical treatment, but they are not aware of what a placebo, for example, is. Okay? So how to explain a placebo? That requires some effort on the part of the person obtaining the informed consent to explain exactly what is a placebo, and why are we doing a trial where we give people a pill that has no active ingredient. Then you should do an effort. This requires an effort. I hope this is clear now.
Yes, that's very important for me to use multimedia, because sometimes for very complicated researches, we the PI is simply decides in the middle of defending his research proposal. He says, okay, what are the facilities and tools, and how do you want to make sure that the participants understand these things, apart from simplifying and apart from someone else explaining? They just say, okay, I just exclude those who are illiterate, and this is not a very good solution. And for me, it's very interesting to know, using different multimedia, because this is a very good solution, as you said, as you mentioned, even for not only illiterate but also people who are knowledgeable. Sometimes multimedia can give them better understanding on what's happening. That was very helpful. Thank you.
So, Maha, are you still planning to have a case study?
Yes, we're starting right now.
Okay.
Do you have time for it?
Well, the short answer is yes, because how much time are you going to give the participants to look at their case study?
How about 15 minutes in small groups?
Okay, do they have the case study?
Yes, it was sent via email last night.
By me yesterday, yeah.
Okay,
good. So, well, you want to start it now?
Yes, right now.
All right, good. So why don't we, how many people do we have here? I think, I don't know if Vivian is still with us. So why don't I make two groups, and each group discuss you tell them what are the directions.
Okay, so you read the case study that was sent to you via email last night, and you discuss you just discuss the ethical issues in the informed consent. Okay, so shall we start the discussion?
Is everyone back? Yes, everyone is back. Very good.
Okay. So let's start with the positive. What do you think is good about this informed consent? If anything is good.
So Gulana mentioned that it's good that there was a consent at that time.
Yes, this is actually a very valid point.
Yeah.
One point is that it states that he voluntarily participated in the study.
Okay, so voluntariness was mentioned. Yes, and the fact that there was an informed consent in the first place in 1900, this is yeah, this was actually way ahead of their time. Okay. So. Yes, Dr. Said, please go ahead.
So it clearly states that this is an experiment or research.
Okay, so it states part of the procedure that will be involved in the research. Okay, excellent. Okay, so if what is missing, if you would rewrite this informed consent, what would you change?
I would clearly stated the duration of the study and to explain the steps of the study. There is not enough explanation. It's just experiment and that's it.
So there is no explanation of what actually the study entails in terms of interventions or procedures to measure these interventions. Okay.
Yeah, and explanation of the risks.
Okay, also it does not mention the risks.
No.
Just mention that it endanger life. In what way?
Yes, okay. Didn't explain, yeah.
But it does mention that the person will get the infection.
Yes, but
I didn't get.
So what if he gets the infection? What are the consequences? What that?
And I didn't get this point. So should this patient be in the island in any way? If he refused, he wants to be in the island, or I didn't get this point.
Point?
The point that he couldn't avoid the infection. What if he didn't go to that camp? Was he going to be there in all ways?
So you're saying they will get the infection anyway?
Yeah, it mentioned that it's unavoidable to get the infection. Why is it unavoidable?
You should answer that. You've discussed yesterday the Willowbrook case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what similarities do you see between these two scenarios?
Is it undue inducement to tell that it is entirely impossible for him to avoid the infection, so he will participate in the study? Is this coercion or undue inducement?
Well, for once, it's not an inducement, because an inducement has to be an incentive.
Benefit.
Something benefit. So,
so it's like the society duty. Why did we accept to have people get infected? Why didn't we improve this?
Okay, so even if this person will in a way or another get the infection, okay,
he should have an alternative. He doesn't have an alternative here.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So one of the essential elements is an alternative. What if he decides not to join the study? What would happen then?
Yeah.
And there was no state of right to withdraw. It's like a prison to be present for two months, not leaving the campus. This is not accepted also.
Okay. So
we had a debate about the $100. Is it a benefit or a compensation?
It's too much for benefit or compensation. It's like $100 American gold on 1900.
And so even 200 if he dies. Even 200.
How come he could get more if he recovered or die? Oh my God. No, it's not accepted.
So who says if it's too much or not?
I said it's really not, yes, I'm sorry. I get emotional with these things. I think $100, even if it's a gold, even if it's 1900, he might lose his life. Is it worth losing his life for it?
It shouldn't be like selling. No, but he should not sell his life for 100 or whatever. I mean, we should not link the research to money. Because it's like blackmailing again. Like yesterday, we said it's like blackmailing. He needs money, so you can just justify this, sell your life.
So I have a comment on this point.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I think that this depends on the how much money he can earn during these 2 months.
Alternative.
He won't earn anything during the research. It's just at the end of the research he's entitled to that 100 gold.
Oh, Dr. Silver, you're back.
Yeah, right. Somehow I left.
So it's a benefit.
Echo again. Hold on.
Dr. Maha, can I ask you something?
Yes, go ahead. Who's asking? I'm sorry. Yes, Dr. Stoughton?
Yes. I just needed to ask you, I think I'm not sure if it's Maha or Sarah said that we shouldn't be compensated with money if we voluntarily doing informed consent or doing a study as a human subject. But I needed to ask, doesn't that happen when some people donate blood? Don't they give them informed consent and they get money in order to give their blood away?
Okay, so if we're talking about giving money to research participants as a general rule, whether it's ethical or not, and there is the other issue of how much money. If so, then how much money? Well, as Professor Henry was actually saying he left again. So he was saying in our breakout room that that in sometimes in phase 1 studies. Phase 1 are done on healthy volunteers, and they are very risky studies. They are studies that involve very high risk because they are safety studies. They increase the dosage until they reach the toxic levels. So sometimes, most of the time in phase 1 studies, participants are compensated with money, okay? And sometimes these are large sums of money. And Professor Andy was saying that a study found that when they increase the amount of money, people or participants start to perceive a larger degree of risk. So they say, if you're giving me this much money to join this study, then this must be very risky. So sometimes actually giving money to participants could be a way of having them value or evaluate, helping them evaluate the degree of risk in a specific study. We have
wasn't that scare them to even participate in the study?
Yes, and if it scares someone to participate, then we are sure that whoever does agree is voluntarily agreeing. Okay, what other issues?
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying now. Yeah, thank you.
But I think he should have a compensation, as Dr. Said said. He has a valid point that he needs compensation for these 2 months. How much he should be earning in these 2 months?
Yes. Sometimes compensation is ethical. Sometimes giving compensation is ethical. For example,
we say is if it recovers the time and inconvenience of the research participant, the compensation is acceptable if the value of the compensation is approved by the research ethics committee.
Okay, if it equals the amount of time and effort, this is one model of compensation. Okay, so yeah, but there are actually other models that look at compensation that are beyond the time and effort of a participant.
Yes.
So there's remember, this is a healthy volunteer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He has no illness.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative?
They didn't state an alternative.
Well,
if he got infected.
what do you think is the alternative for someone who's a healthy volunteer?
He should have a right to withdraw.
Well, he should simply have the right not to participate.
Yeah.
Yes.
The alternative is nothing.
Yes.
Right? So that's the alternative. He could just simply not join the study. And the study itself offers him no direct benefit, no direct medical benefit, right? Because
Yes.
he's not sick. Which is fine. I mean, this is, you know, we do a lot of phase 1 studies on healthy volunteers. And the only way to get them to join is to offer them an incentive. In the US, we have this concept where we have the professional guinea pig who goes around joining phase 1 studies, and they make a lot of money. And they call them the professional guinea pigs. They go from one phase 1 study to another, and there's nothing wrong about that. And people, if they want to choose, if the IRB has approved the study and they want to join the study and risk their lives, that's up to them, right?
And it's compensation or benefit in that?
Again, if they're a healthy volunteer, there's no medical benefit.
Yeah.
It's right. I mean, there's no medical benefit to catching yellow fever or the coronavirus. I mean, that's how these phase 1 studies are done, or vaccine studies. These are human challenge studies.
Yeah.
And we need healthy volunteers. And since there's no medical benefit, so we pay them money. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
It should be stated clearly that there's no medical benefit, right?
Well, I mean, why? Well, yeah, you could state it clearly, but why would the participant think that there is a medical benefit? He's healthy.
Okay.
Well, no, it should state there is no benefit to you, but it should state that there is benefit to society. There are 2 types of benefits, to the participant and to society.
Can I understand something, please, Doctor? I was thinking about, like, you know, what you said about his benefit. Like, if he doesn't have no medical benefits, if he got infected with yellow fever, they gonna let him die?
Well, no, he'll get the greatest care possible.
Okay.
I think they're going to let him die.
Okay, I mean, doesn't that include medical benefit or?
Oh, no, that's care? Not a medical benefit. That's how you treat research injury. It's not considered a benefit if you get a new illness and then get treated. That's one of the essential elements of informed consent is what are the treatments for research injury. Okay, but I don't consider that a benefit. I consider that an obligation.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
So, other thoughts about this consent form?
Dr. Zakaria is our nominee to read out our notes.
Read out the notes. What are you talking? What have you been discussing?
So I have. It didn't mention having the contact info.
Yeah.
There is no contact info.
Right. Okay. Well, why don't we wrap up? I think you've been discussing other missing elements, more description of the risks. It's implied that there's benefit to society. compensation for research injury, the best medical care possible. It's a little as a lot of consent forms, there's always maximization of the benefits or overemphasis of the benefits and underestimation of the risks. Some people talked about undue inducement. As I mentioned in one group, if anything, studies have shown that when people are offered a lot of money to join the trial, that's a signal that this must be a risky study. There's a lot of thoughts that there's no such thing as an undue inducement. People actually, they read the consent form and actually realize what they're getting into. For the proposed human challenge studies for COVID, if they're going to inject people with a strain of the virus, they're proposing to pay these volunteers $5,000. And I don't know if that's an undue inducement, but I actually thought it might be higher. I mean, these people are risking their lives. But a lot of people are willing to do it. So what else about this consent form? See now, other elements, contact information, I agree. Maha talked about contact information if a participant wants to know more about their rights. Who should be the contact for that?
Actually, Dr. Zainab said too about the confidentiality.
Well, no. Let's answer one question at a time, please. So, who should the contact information be regarding patients' rights or participants' rights?
Principal investigator.
One of the co-investigator. Okay, well, that's an interesting choice. So let's say if a participant has a concern about their rights as a research participant because they're concerned that the investigator is treating them wrongly. So
the IRB.
The IRB.
The IRB. Okay. Yeah. All right. So what's your question about confidentiality?
No, I was just mentioning when we were discussing in the room, there was Dr. Zainab suggested that there was no confidentiality for the patient at all. Has been mentioned.
There's no mention of how they're going to keep the data confidential. I agree. Right. It should be explained how they will keep the data private. Good. Great. So any other elements?
So his right to withdraw from the experiment, if he will leave the experiment, he will lose all the benefits.
Well, so actually, that's a good point. The consent form says he agrees not to leave. Right? So that's a little coercive. Also, it says if he does leave, he'll forfeit his compensation or his incentive, and that's not considered ethical. Nowadays, you can't wait until the end of the trial to pay people because that's coercive. The correct procedure is that you have to give the money in installments throughout the study. I mean, it's okay to leave a little more towards the end, because you do want people to stay till the end, but it's considered coercive if you say you're not going to get the incentive until the end of the study, because that will prevent them from leaving the study, and that's not considered ethical. All right, good point. All right. So, what do you think? Everything you ever wanted to know about informed consent?
Yes, for me it was very interesting. No, we talked about it. I thought it's his. I thought it's we could see the actual one, but yes, it's not in his language. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Nothing. It was my misunderstanding.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Good. So, any other final thoughts?
I just had one. Can we have more suggested case studies? That
I'm sorry?
Can we have more suggested case studies, like not like a homework or something, but it's like we can read more and try to get out, practice more, exercise on it more?
Well, the short answer is yes. We will have more case studies and breakout rooms, and absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And don't, and we'll have discussion forums outside of the classroom. Okay. So you could call that whatever you want. You could call that discussion forums, or you could call it homework, if you want to call it homework. Okay. So
the whole course is homework. Actually, we're working from home.
Right. That's right. Yes, we're working from home. Good thought. Don't get scared by the word homework. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. This was very good. Thank you, Maha, for a very extensive and complete and enjoyable discussion on informed consent. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So,
Dr. Silverman, this is Dr. Janabasi from the Gambia.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Okay.
Yeah, I was following the discussion, even though I joined the session very late. But I guess it was very interesting and interactive, and we are learning a lot from our colleagues from the Middle East. And I say hi to everybody down there, and it serves as a baseline for us, because as you know, we are also preparing for a similar one here in the Gambia very soon with you and your team. And I guess it was a good platform for us as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll have the recording soon. And thank you for joining. It's never too late to join the session. I know we all have other duties and all that stuff. So we'll this is a start, and we have to iron out all the challenges.
Okay.
So we'll get there, and we'll determine what is the perfect context and setting on how to do this training. We're all learning how to do this new type of training, and so we'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. We'll talk more. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Very good. So let me end the meeting, and it's been really good to see you all. Okay. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh, yes. Good evening. Yes, right.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.